So the cover by Yisrael Kra Meikara Shapir Dami. Ultimately, the Gemara says it's kosher. The Gemara says pshita, but that's obvious. In other words, that's the same case ultimately of singeing the head of the animal. We see that any time the Obed Kochavim performs a de facto act of cooking, but his intention was not to cook, his intention was for something else, then the laws of Bishul Akum do not apply. Same thing over here. Tuish Gemara says, no, I might have thought as follows. Ma'odatema, livashule mana kamachavein, kamash malon lishrure mana kamachavein. We'll say, I might have thought that maybe the act of taking a waterlogged piece of wood and putting it in the oven to dry out, maybe that's called what? Maybe that is called cooking. Maybe that's called bishul. Maybe that is called bishul. But kamash malan, it's not called bishul. Kamash malan, I will say, it's called drying out waterlogged wood. And because it's not called bishul, ultimately, again, the Yisrael could go ahead and eat the gourd which was buried in the oven. I'm going to have Rabbi Shmuel. So I'll say, now, just so you should know, these halachos are exceptionally important. First of all, again, a person works in a commercial setting with non-Jews. It's important to understand these particular persons. It's important to understand these halachas. Also, we'll say this comes up more often than you think if a person has help in the house, right? And that helps out with some of the cooking. So we'll say, so one has to be very careful to avoid b'shlakim. So, in the good old days with pilot lights, so a Jew would light the pilot light, and that's the pilot light is the olam vod, as we're going to see in just a moment. Today's day and age where we don't have pilot lights, and I think, right, and most of the ovens don't have pilot lights.
You mean electric cookers? Is that what you mean?
Just say that again.
Electric cookers.
God, I just wanted to hear you say it again. That was good. Right, correct. Meaning, so it seems to be today where you have like electronic ignition on the stove, so with pashtos they don't have that. So we'll say, so this is just a very, very, very important, these are very important halachos to be conscious of, because people don't realize that sometimes what's happening inside my kitchen is mamish problematic. And I will say, you should know, the halacha is that if it turns out that you have bishul akum occurring in your kitchen, person has bishul akum in their kitchen, those kelim have to be kashered, right? Meaning it's no different ultimately, again, that had something non-kosher been cooked in the utensils as well. So we're going to get into some of these halachos which actually occur somewhat often. I'm going to review them with Shmuel. So let's listen to this. Listen to this. A Jew put meat on coals. Good, Jew put meat on coals. And what happens? The non-Jew comes along and what? He turns it over. So I put the steak on the grill, and my non-Jewish friend comes along and turns it over. So what's the halacha? Say mutter, even though the non-Jew participated in the cooking process, it's mutter. Why? So the Gemara says, then what's the case? So we'll say, if you want to say, well, even if the non-Jew didn't turn it over, then what? It would have cooked anyway. Then pshita. Then that's obvious. Then that is obvious, right? Rather, it must be what it will say, that if the steak wasn't turned over, then what? It wouldn't have cooked. And it's only because the akum came along and turned it over, then now that it cooked. But if that's the case, amai mutter. We'll say, if the non-Jew did something without his action, the item would not have cooked, then why should that item be permitted? At the end of the day, that's bishul akum. To which the Gemara says, "Tzricha di'ilahafa chava bashal betarti shoy v'hashta kabashal bechadashaita." We'll say, what's the case? The case is where the item would have cooked without his intervention as well. But let's say it would have taken it 2 hours to cook. Now that he intervened, it's going to take 1 hour to cook. So the Gemara says, even though he expedited, he fast-tracked the cooking process, nevertheless, the food is still permitted. So what would I have thought? Keruve bishule milsihi. Well, so I might have thought that the act of hastening the cooking process is the equivalent of cooking itself, and therefore should be aser. Kamash malan, that it is not. Kamash malan, I will say that even if the Gentile hastens the cooking process, as long as the cooking process could have taken place without him, that's not bishul akum.
Saying the akum cannot put the food on the fire?
Oh, hold on. We're not finished yet. The caterers are getting nervous. I know. Hold on. So again, what you're going to see, what I will say, is that we're taking this step by step. So step number 1 is the act of an akum hastening the cooking process is not bishul akum. Okay, what we're doing is now we're working from the specific getting to the more global. One second, but we learned that once food gets to Michael ben Drusai, so we'll say we recognize Michael ben Drusai. Where do we recognize him from? right? Hopefully you should never recognize Ben Drusai. He was not a pleasant individual, apparently, to run into, right? He was a robber. He was a thief. So remember, again, we learned this by Hilchos Shabbos. So Michael Ben Drusai means food that is 1/3 cooked. So Machlokes HaPoskim, if Michael Ben Drusai means 1/3 cooked or food that has been cooked for 1/3 of its cooking time. Those two things are not necessarily the same. So we'll say, but leaving that aside, but we learned once food gets to the threshold of Michael Ben Drusai, which is considered to be the most basic edibility. Is edibility a word? Edibility? Edibility? Edibility. Good. Once it gets to the threshold of edibility, right, that ultimately, again, then it's considered to be halachically cooked. So we learned that once food gets to the threshold of Michael Ben Drusai, of the Kochavim, as the Gemara says, ha'enu k'Michael Ben Drusai, yesh po mishum of the Kochavim. And we'll say if it hasn't reached the level of Michael Ben Drusai, then what? Then Lamais again, it is subject to the laws of Bishalakum, to which the Gemara says you're right, but Hassam who kigon the osvei besilsa b'shakle of the Kochavim v'osvei betanura. So we'll say listen to this. That case would be able to say is as follows. If a Jew were to go ahead and cook it to Michael Ben Drusai, and then what? Take it off and then put it in a basket, right? We'll say, and then at that point in time, his act of cooking comes to an end. If the akum were then to take over after that, we'll say, that's what could be problematic because that's considered to be a brand new act of cooking. Now, we have to further clarify this. Listen to this brayso. Here we go, and here's where we begin to get to the more contemporary halachas. If a Jew places, so also I just want to point out there's another very important qualification. Once food gets to Michael Ben Drusai, so by definition it's not subject to Bishul Akum anymore. So we'll say that's qualification number 2. Qualification number 3. A Jew could put a piece of meat on the coals, and a non-Jew could then go ahead and turn it over. In other words, which means the non-Jew could then go ahead and watch it and be involved in it. So we'll say, listen to this. What's the case over here? I, the Jew, put my steak on the grill, and then I go out. So we'll say the Gemara's example is that I'm going to the shul or to the Beis Medrash. Right? Where else is there to go? Right? Where else is there to go? So I go out to the shul, to the Beis Medrash. While I'm gone, so the Gentile goes ahead and watches over my food. So whatever he's doing, he's turning it, he's flipping it, he's seasoning it, and the Gemara says, not a problem. Not a problem. Similarly, Isha shofesas Isha kedera agabe kira. A woman can put up a pot of food on top of the stove. And her Gentile neighbor, I'm using neighbor as an example, and the Gentile woman, the Gentile neighbor can now come in and what? Stir the food. Right? She can go ahead and open the pot, stir the food. Until the woman comes back from the bathhouse or from the shul, and she need not be concerned. So what does this sound like over here? What this sounds like over here is what's this next qualification? What this sounds like is, as long as the Jew did what? Initiated the cooking process, even if a Gentile steps in afterwards and takes care of it and finishes it up, that's fine, as long as the Jew started the process. So now the Gemara says something very interesting. What about the flip case? Oh, we'll say, what about this case? What happens if the Gentile, put the meat on the grill? Now we'll say, leaving aside non-Jewish handling of meat. That's leaving aside that particular. Let's assume for a moment that's not a problem, right? So we'll say you don't have to use meat; you can substitute with whatever you want. Let's say again, the non-Jew started the process. The non-Jew took my steak and he put it on my grill. And what happens? I'm the one now who comes in afterwards and I flip it and I season it. See, he initiated the cooking process. I stepped in and finished it off. Are you almost finished with the ice? Is it almost done? Okay, so the Gemara says the following. So Mahu, Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak. So also listen to this. So Nachman bar Yitzchak says as follows. He says Kal v'chomer. He makes a Kal v'chomer. We'll say, what's the Kal v'chomer? Gamru biyad oved kochavim mutter. So also listen to this. This is actually an interesting Kal v'chomer. If an oved kochavim finishing off the process is mutter. So also remember again, case number one is where the Yisrael started and the akum finished. If the Gemara suggests over here, if that case is okay, where the Ovei Kochavim finished, then Gamru biyad Yisrael koshkin. So we'll say this is actually very interesting havamina. See, the Gemara makes the assumption that what is the more chashiv type of involvement in food prep? So the Gemara assumes it's the completion, which is interesting. It's he who completes the food who is considered to have the dominant role in the food preparation. So what the Gemara is saying is as follows. It's actually the second case, which is the first case, which is the bigger chiddush. The first case is where the Yisrael initiated, the Akum finished up. So the Gemara is going to say, if the Akum finishing up is okay, then now Achas Kama V'Kama what? The Akum starting and the Yisrael finishing up is certainly okay. We'll say, amazing. By the way, what do you begin to see? What are you beginning to see involved?
Any involvement.
Excellent. Any involvement, Rabbi says. You're beginning to see, now the shaila is going to be the definition of any, right? Does any mean any? I come by, the akum's doing everything, I dab a little, do you dab salt?
No.
Dash. All right, I put on a dash of salt. Look at this. Right, I put in a dash of salt. So we'll say, is that it? So obviously what we're beginning to see is, I need just Judaic involvement. The shaila just is, what is the scope of that involvement? So far we've got, whether I start, the akum finishes, that's fine, or akum starts and I finish, that's fine as well. Let's go back. This is a very exciting Gemara. Very exciting Gemara. So listen to this. So the Gemara says, Itmar nami amra bar Rabbi Yochanan amra Rav Acha Rabbi Yochanan. Here we go. We'll see, here it's articulated. Bein she'eniach ovid kochavim v'hafach Yisrael, whether the non-Jew put the meat on the fire and the Jew turned it over, or bein she'eniach Yisrael v'hafach ovid kochavim, or the Jew put it on and the ovid kochavim turned it over, mutter ve'eino asra. We'll say, when is it bishul akum? Eino asra at shetei tchilaso ugamro biyad ovid kochavim. We'll say the only time it's bishul akum is when what? When there is no Jewish involvement in the cooking process. If the akum does everything from beginning to end, then ultimately what? That's when it's bishul akum. Now we'll say, now I just want to point out something very interesting, which is up until now we've assumed that involvement does require what? Actual involvement with the food. The one thing we haven't spoken about is what? What happens if the Yisrael is not involved with the food, but what? Lights the fire, lights the flame. So that's going to be our next discussion. But so far what we see is this is very exciting. So as long as a Jew is involved somehow in the active cooking process, beginning, end, or middle, as long as there's some level of Jewish involvement, there is no issue of bishul akum. Here we go. Amar Ravina, Hilchasa. The halacha is, Hayrifta the shagar ovid kochavim va'afa Yisrael. We'll say, watch this. If you have bread, now the shagar ovid kochavim, Rashi says, is hisik tanur. We'll say, if there is bread, then I the Jew, went ahead and made the bread, but what? The akum fired up the stove, or inami, shagar Yisrael va'afa ovid kochavim, or I, the Jew, fired up the stove, and the ovid kochavim made the bread, inami, shagar ovid kochavim, va'afa ovid kochavim, or if the non-Jew fired up the stove, the non-Jew made the bread, va'asa Yisrael v'chata b'chitui, and the Jew came along and what I will say, stoked the coals a little bit, right? Stoked the logs of wood, shapir dummy. Wow. So we'll say, so now what do you see from here? You mamish begin to see any involvement. Even I have to be involved in the cooking process somehow, but even if I'm not directly involved in food preparation, but instead I'm involved in some type of manipulation of the heat source, which is necessary for cooking, suddenly again I will say that becomes bishul Yisrael, that it becomes Jewish cooking and no longer issue of bishul akum. So whether I'm involved ultimately again in the cooking process, so we'll say, so therefore again, if a person, so going back to our contemporary, housekeeper situation, so that might say if somebody does have someone non-Jewish who does some cooking in the home, so again, I don't have to stand there watching the cooking, but lamaisa, I do have to turn on the flame. And again, I will say, once I turn on the flame, and again, the interesting part is, that one flame could be what's used for the entire day. I don't have to turn on the flame separately for every single act of cooking. I mean, I don't know if it's a good idea to leave a burner on the whole day, but l'maisa, again, that one manipulation of the flame is enough to cover all of those Gentile acts of cooking. So incredible. Dag maliach. We'll say, here we go. What about salt? We're back to salted fish. Rashi says over here, dag maliach shamocho ovikochavim ubimelichasu necha below bishul. Now, we'll say, now the case over here is, this fish is salted by the oven kochavim, and essentially it becomes, you could eat it without bishul. See, what's a good example of this?
Bacala.
Russian fish.
They salt, no cooking. Good. So also you pick up some bakala. Where does one purchase bakala?
Pickled herring, you can call.
Same good, any kind of good. So the idea over here is that lemaisa, this fish, is not cooked, but yet it's salted. So we'll say it's cured. Is that the right? Cured. So it's cured. It's cured ultimately again, but not cooked. So we'll say, so what's the status ultimately again of this fish? So it says the Gemara Dagma Chizkiya Shari. So Chizkiya says that it is permitted. Rabbi Yochanan Aser. Rabbi Yochanan says that it's Aser. Beisa Tzluya. We'll say, what about a roasted egg? Now, here's what's interesting about why is a roasted egg an issue? So we'll see this in just a moment. Bar Kafra Shari. Bar Kafra says it's mutter. Rabbi Yochanan Aser. Rabbi Yochanan says it's Aser. Now, this is actually quite interesting. Why would Bar Kafra say that a roasted egg is mutter? Meaning, at the end of the day, this is bishalakum. The yakum is cooking. So this is actually quite interesting. Look at Rashi. It's the first of the short lines in Rashi. Bar Kafra Shari. Hoil ubalia ochel didei v'lo naga ovid kochavim b'ochla. Well, so this is amazing because the ovid kochavim never really interacts with the food itself. Why does he not interact with the food itself? Because it's inside the shell. So Bar Kafra says because there is a lack of direct involvement with the food item itself because it's covered by the shell. Therefore, again, the roasted egg is not subject to bishul akum. Incredible halacha, or I should say incredible machlokes. So we'll say, so again, in Dagmalia, Chizkiya says mutter, Rabbi Yochanan says aser, Beitza Tzluya roasted egg, Bar Kafra says it's mutter, Rabbi Yochanan says it's aser. Ki aser Rav Dimi Amar, Echad Dagmaliach, ve'echad Beitza Tzluya. So we'll say, comes along Rav Dimi, and Rav Dimi put these together. Rav Dimi said, whether the salted fish or the roasted egg, Chizkiya Bar Kafra sharu, Chizkiya and Bar Kafra both said it's mutter, Rabbi Yochanan aser. And Rabbi Yochanan says that it's aser. Rabbi Chia Parva, Iklo Labei Reish Kalusa. Let's listen to this. Rabbi Chia Parva one time went to the house of the Reish Kalusa. Let's remember again, the Reish Kalusa is the head of Babylonian Jewry. Amrulei. So the members of the Reish Kalusa said to Rabbi Chia, Beitza Tzluya Mai. What's the halacha with Beitza Tzluya? So Amrulei. So we'll say, Rabbi Chia responded, Chizkiya Bar Kafra Sharu, for Rabbi Yochanan Aser. So Rabbi Chia responded. He said, Chizkiya Bar Kafra says that a beisa tzluya, an egg roasted by an akum, is going to be mutter, and Rabbi Yochanan says that it's aser. Ve'im devar shel echad b'makom shtein. Rabbi say this is a simple situation of what? 2 against 1. 2 say that it's mutter. 1 says that it's aser. Therefore, what Rabbi Chia said? Rabbi Chia said that the roasted egg by the akum is mutter. So Amalu Rav Zvid. So we'll say Rav Zvid was there as well. And what does he say? Lo sasitule. Don't listen to what Rabbi Chia just said. The egg is not mutter. Hachi Amra Abaye Hilchas Sakavase de Rabbi Yochanan. Said Abaye said Rabbi Yochanan said that's what? Namely, that an egg roasted by an akum ultimately again is going to be aser. So we'll say the people of the house of the Reish Kalusa did not like the fact that Rav Zvid just asered the egg, and therefore what did they do? Ashkeyuha natuga dechala v'nach nafshe. They gave him, I will say, some type of tainted vinegar, and he died. In other words, we'll say they poisoned Rav Zvid. So we'll say, so I just want to point out, historically we know that the members of the house of the Reish Galusa, so were very often corrupt individuals. I should say very often. Were at times corrupt individuals. People ultimately, again, who were seeking power and who abused that power in multiple ways. We see many times tensions between the Rabbanim, and not the Reish Galusa himself, but the members of the household of the Reish Galusa. So literally, again, they did not like the fact that Rav Zvid, out of all things, it was just an egg. It's just an egg. But apparently, again, there are some people that don't like to be told no. That's a general issue. Right? They will say, therefore, again, what did they do? They poisoned him, and Rav Zvid died. Ten Rabbanon. We'll say, here we go. Let's go back to a little bit. So Rav Zvid, ten Rabbanon. HaKafrisin. We'll say, so now we're going to start speaking about some specific types of foods. Kafrisin. We'll say, Kafrisin are the shells or the husks for caper berries. We'll see, remember again in Mesechus Brachos, we spent a lot of time regarding the tzlaf, right? The tzlaf, the caper bush, right? Tzlaf shel arla we spoke about. So the husks of caper berries, va'kaflutos. What are kaflutos? We'll say, if we look at Rashi, karsi. So these are leeks. Ne'achal k'mo she'chayim. So we'll say these are items that can be eaten raw. Right, these are items that can be eaten raw. So the husks of the caper berries, kaflutos are leeks. Vahamatlia, we'll see what a matlia is. Hachamin, water, hot water. Klayos, right? So ultimately we'll say klayos are roasted kernels of grain. Rashi says over here, Klayos nami shelo nishtanu. These are not really changed through cooking. So all these items can really be eaten raw. So mutarin shelahen, if you get any of these items from a Gentile, ultimately what? Mutarin. Now we'll say they are all mutar. Beitzat sluya. What about a roasted egg? Asura. So we'll say a roasted egg will be asur. Shemen. We'll say, what about the oil of a Gentile? So that we already learned yesterday. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasio Beis Dino Nimnu Allah Vetirua. So we'll say shemen of a Gentile was originally asur, but Rabbi Yehuda and his Beis Din reversed that ruling and said that it is mutar. So the Gemara says, Tanya. So he hamatlia, he pashalya, he shiasa. So matlia is the same thing as pashalya, which is the same thing as shiasa. Fantastic. So my shiasa, Amar Rabbi Bechana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Listen to this. Ha arban shnin dinafik hai uvdom Mitzrayim. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan says it's amazing. It's been 40 years since this episode in Egypt. Rabbi Bechana, the day Amar ha shisin shnin dinafik ha uvdom Mitzrayim. And Rabbi Bechana said, no, it's 60. Right? He said it's been 60 years since this episode that happened in Egypt. So we'll say they're going to explain what matlia is by recounting an episode that occurred in Egypt. So we'll say, so what happens? Rabbi Yochanan says it's been 40 years. Rabbi Yochanan says it's been 60 years. The Gemara says, by the way, below pligi, they're not disagreeing. Mar b'shanei or mar b'shanei. We'll say each is recounting ultimately again from his own lifetime. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara is meaning his own reckoning of the years, meaning his number of years since he found out about this episode. So the Gemara says as following. What happened? So the Gemara says, Maisi bizra de karpasa. So we'll say, so what happens? So they brought, if you look at Rashi says over here, no, not yet, sorry. Maisi, so what happens? Maisi bizra de karpasa. So they brought a seed, or we'll say bizra is a seed, karpasa in this case is cress, ubizra de kisna, and flax seeds, ubizra de shavlalisa, fenugreek seeds, vitaru lohu bahadi hadadi b'shure, and they soaked all of this together in warm water. Vishavik le ad mikabel, and the goal was to mix all of these seeds together and to let them grow together. Umaisi chatz bicharati, they brought a new barrel, or new barrels, really plural. Umalli mayo, and they went ahead and they filled it with water. Vitaru buhu gargishta, they put the clay inside the barrel. And what happens? Va'ailin lebei bani. And these people then, after they did this, they went into the bathhouse. So this is an episode that occurred in Egypt. They went into the bathhouse. Adinafku melav levi va'achli minayu. By the time they got out of the bathhouse, so we'll say what happens, shoots had already grown, right? The saplings have already, not saplings is the wrong word, shoots had already grown from this plant. And the people came out of the bathhouse, they ate from it, literally from the top of their head until their toes. Amar Rav Ashi, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Milin. So we'll see, Rav Ashi said, name Rabbi Chanina, Milin. This is just a tall tale. In other words, this actually never happened. Or as we'll say, it's impossible that they planted it, then went into the bathhouse, and by the time they got out, what? The shoots were already growing. Impossible. For Amrle Bimilin, others say, no, this happened, but it happened through sorcery or through witchcraft. Tan Rabbanan, HaKosvan Sha'ovdei Kochavim, Shehuch Muchamin Biyore Gedola Aser, Biyore Kitana Mutis. We'll say, what's Kusban? Rashi says, Psolas Shaltmarim, Sha'asume and Shechar V'cholten also. So we'll say this is the leftover dates that ultimately again are used to make date beer. So they would go ahead and they would boil it up in water. So the status, of course, becomes what's the status of the dates? So the Gemara says if they were boiled in a large vat, then it's asur. In a small vat, it's mutar. We'll say the assumption is, well, if it's a large vat, bepashtas, it's been used for other food items. Therefore, the dates absorb some type of prohibited absorption. If it's a small vat, then you could assume it hasn't been used for anything else before, and therefore, again, there are no prohibited absorptions. Ve'izuhi yorekitana. We'll say, what's the definition of a small vat, a small pot? Amrabianai kol she'in sipor dror yachali kanes besocho. We'll say means any pot whose opening is so small that you can't get its sipor dror. We'll say sipor dror is a type of bird. Sipor dror can't fit into it. The dilma admuye admua iluya. So we'll say, but maybe you could get the bird in if you cut it up in pieces. Maybe you can't get the bird in whole, but let me say, get the bird in if you cut it up in pieces. Ella kolshen rosh sipor dror yachali kanes besocha. Rather, we'll say the definition ultimately of a small vat is any not vat is the wrong word. Any pot that is so small that the head of a tzipor dror would not fit into it. So we'll say the head is the tzipor is a small. It's any pot that's so small that the opening couldn't get in, and the head of a tzipor door is a small pot, and therefore you don't have to assume that it's used for anything substantive, and therefore what? Therefore there are no blios. Therefore you don't have to assume that there are any prohibited absorptions. But 1 second, but we learned that whether you cook the dates in a large pot or a small pot, it's mutter. So we'll say this machlokis over here is what is the status or what is the impact of the absorptions ultimately on the dates. So the opinion will hold that the absorptions do not have a positive impact, so therefore because they don't have a positive impact, ultimately again the absorptions are halachically inconsequential, whereas the other opinion says no, even if the absorptions don't have a positive impact, the fact that there are absorptions there will still prohibit the dates. I'm going to have Sheshes. Hai mishcha shlika da aramai aser. Rav Sheshes says, mishcha shlika is boiled oil. This boiled oil of an Aramim, of a Gentile, of an Akum, ultimately again is going to be aser. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Safra, why is that? Lamai nechosh. Remember again, we just got finished saying oil was originally prohibited, but what? But was subsequently permitted by the Bezdin of Rabbi Yehuda Nisir, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Now Rav Sheshes is saying that this boiled oil of the Aramin is aser. So Rav Safra says, Lamai nechosh, what's the issue? If you're concerned that what? That they're going to mix in wine with it, that's not going to happen. Why? Because we'll say that ultimately will ruin the oil. If it's because of Bishul Akum, we'll say this oil could actually be consumed even raw, which by definition means that it doesn't need cooking. If it doesn't need cooking, then it's not such the Bishul Akum. If you want to say it's because it's made in a pot of Ovdei Kochavim in which other prohibited food items were made, and therefore there's a prohibited absorption, no seitam lefkam hu mutter. Ultimately, again, we'll say this will be no seitam lefkam. Any taste, we'll say will have a negative impact, and therefore again it's mutter. Ba'amin Rabbi Asi, hani ahini shaliki. Rabbi say these aramai, these cooked dates of a Gentile, what's their status? My chole lob tibaylecha devade sharu. So we'll say sweet dates. It's clear that they're totally permitted. So why is that? Rashi says over here, because they're eaten raw. Since they're eaten raw, they don't need to be cooked. Therefore, by definition, they're mutter. Meriri loti ba'lecha devade asiri. If they're bitter, it's certainly aser. Why Rabbi say? Because they can't be eaten raw, can only be eaten through cooking, and therefore it is bishul akum. Kiti ba'lecha mitzimai. Rabbi say, what happens if they're middle of the road dates? Not sweet, not bitter. So what's the status? Amar lahu, ma'iti ba'lechu. The Rebbe aser. Why even asking this shayla? Ultimately, and our Rebbe already told us that it's aser. Who is our Rebbe? Umanu Levi. So we'll say Levi was on record as already saying that this type of food item is going to be aser. Shesisa. So we'll say, what about shesisa? So what is shesisa? So look at Rashi. Tav shela aser mikemach shal klayos sheib yavshim b'tanur. Also listen to this. So shesisa is this type of food item which is made from flour. Either it's made from flour of parched kernels of grain that are dried out in the oven, or it's made from lentil flour. I will say the idea is because it's so sweet, they add vinegar to blunt some of the sweetness. So the Gemara is asking over here, what's the status of this shesisa? Rav Shari, Avoda Shmuel Levi Asri. So we'll say Rav said it was permitted. The father of Shmuel and Levi said that it was asr. If it's made out of wheat or barley, everybody agrees that it is going to be permitted, right? Because this type of shesisa, normally vinegar was not added. Ultimately, again, if it's made with legumes, right? The flour from legumes, where vinegar is added, everyone agrees that it's asr. Also remember again, vinegar is an issue. Why? Because it comes from wine. Keep ligir. We'll say where do we have the machlokas? All right, well, so you know what? We'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up in Meretz Hashem with the remainder of the. Just don't eat shesisa before we finish this up tomorrow, right? Put it on the side.